Good evening, everyone. It is wonderful having all of you join us this evening for the third part in our wellness series, brought to you by Adath Israel Synagogue, my congregation, where I am the senior rabbi, Adam Cutler, as well as Beth David, Beth Tikvah, and Beth Emeth. We are in for a wonderful, wonderful treat this evening with our special guest, Rabbi Jordan Bendat-Appell, a fantastic rabbi and a friend of mine for many years. Rabbi Bendat-Appell is currently director of Camp Ramah in Canada, a job I once thought I'd want for myself. Prior to that, he was in the faculty at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, where he directed the program for Jewish mindfulness and meditation teacher training, in which he taught meditation, particularly to cantors and to rabbis. Rabbi Appell is a graduate, or received smicha from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Soon after, he created Orot Center for New Jewish Learning. He served at a pulpit for a short period of time and then saw the light and decided, that's not the way I want to be a rabbi. Very importantly, Rabbi Bendat-Appell is the winner of the Pomegranate Prize from the Covenant Foundation. And if you don't know about this prize, it is like amongst the Jewish education community, the top prize. So Rabbi Bendat-Appell is really well renowned and well respected amongst his peers for education, and particularly for this kind of education. It is my pleasure to welcome him. Thank you for being here with us, Rabbi Bendat-Appell, and we look forward to learning from you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Cutler. Really a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you for the sweet introduction. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and really fun to see the crew who's with us tonight, including some family members, which is so fun, and new people and folks who I've known for years. Our plan for tonight is I'm going to introduce some of the kind of key concepts in what I refer to as Jewish mindfulness. And I'm hoping that it's a really accessible, approachable kind of understanding, and I want to locate it within Jewish tradition a bit. We could easily spend, not only tonight, but many nights talking about Jewish mindfulness, but I think really at the core of what I want to talk about, ironically, is that this isn't just about talking about it or even thinking about it. It's about experiencing it and doing it. So we'll also have a bit of time towards the end when we'll get an opportunity to try some of the practices that I'm going to share for you tonight. I love that this program was brought into a series about wellness in a Jewish context, because it's really at home there. And when I think about wellness, we all know that there's some element of our health and wellness that is out of our control, and things happen. And there's also an element of wellness which is in our control, in which we're empowered to cultivate health. And that language of cultivation is actually really at the core of this practice. And it's worth looking at the Hebrew word. The Hebrew roots that we would use to talk about cultivation and that word avodah in Hebrew can mean a number of different things. In modern Hebrew, it can mean just work. It also means, in a kind of religious context, it can mean spiritual practice or religious practice. Avodah shebalev, the rabbis ask, what is this service or spiritual work, cultivation of the heart? Zot tefillah, they say. This is prayer. So there is a way in which this idea of avodah, which has that resonance of being about work, which means it requires some effort and ongoing attention, it's also the same word that we would use to talk about spiritual practice. And so when I think about Jewish mindfulness, and when I think about wellness, I'm really drawn towards this idea of avodah, of something that's about ongoing cultivation. If I want something to grow, it behooves me to nurture it and to cultivate it. So if I said to my friend Rabbi Cutler, I would say, Adam, hey, strangest thing, I realized that I want to become a great guitar player. And then if he said, oh, Jordan, that's great. Like, did you get a guitar? Are you taking lessons? Are you watching videos? And imagine if I said to him, no, I'm not doing any of those things. I just want to be a great guitar player. He'd say, like, oh, that's weird. That's a weird way of going about becoming a good guitar player. You just want to be it. And we all know in the realm of guitar or in the realm of sports or in learning a language, in so many elements of our lives, we just know if you want to develop that skill, you have to work at it. There's no shortcut. It requires effort and ongoing work. But it's not often the case that we kind of think about our own wellness and well-being in that same way. And that there is, to a great degree, we're empowered to cultivate and nurture who we are and who we hope to be. And actually, the approach in this practice is really to affirm that no matter what, we're always cultivating who we are. If we spend every day angry about a situation, and we may have every reason in the world to be angry about this situation, but if we spend every day angry about that, we couldn't help but be cultivating a heart with anger in it. The same could be said in a kind of the opposite direction. If we want to feel happiness, if we want to feel gratitude, if we want to feel calm, if we want to feel connected, if we want to feel present, we can also go about cultivating those qualities. It's not like a machine, or don't get me wrong, like in which you put in the inputs and then in a kind of clear and neat way, happiness comes out the other end. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, and this is really at the core of our tradition, is the idea that through ongoing cultivation, we become more in alignment with who we hope to be. And certainly how I think about something like prayer every day. When I say Modeh Ani, grateful am I, in the morning, I'm not just checking a box that I said those words. I'm really trying to cultivate a heart of gratitude because I want to feel gratitude. And the same is true, I have to imagine, that the rabbis who said 3 times a day you should be saying Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha, right? The prayer, the Ashrei, which is mostly Psalm 145, but the rabbis put at the beginning of it these other 2 lines from the Psalms, which underline this idea of Ashrei, of happy. And there's a sense of, like, why do we have to say that every day, 3 times a day? It must be about cultivating an awareness of happiness or an experience of happiness. We only have to develop the things that aren't there. So, this is really affirming that we are empowered to grow our experience, as it were. I'm not saying this is easy, and certainly we all have kind of like deep furrows in our own minds and hearts that have been created through doing things in certain ways for many years. So breaking out of the habitual ways in which we do things is not easy, but it's doable. And we all do it all the time. We do things differently, often in small ways, but sometimes in big ways. Sometimes because we choose to, sometimes because we have to. So the invitation tonight is really to see this as as an opening into an approach to Jewish living in which we're really cultivating who we hope to be. Again, I'll speak a little bit more. Please, you could send in questions in the chat. We're going to do a Q&A at the end and have a chance to respond to the questions. I probably won't see your question in the chat until the end. Otherwise, if I look at them, I will get way too distracted. So let me just change my screen. Okay, now I can see your sweet faces easier. What do we focus on when we look at our lives? To me, that's a fascinating question, right? And I think about it sometimes, even like last night, I was helping our daughter Orly go to sleep, and she's 10 years old, and she was just telling me about some things from her day. And it was really interesting to me, of all the things that took place in Orly's day, what are the things that are like keeping her up? What are the things that are most present in her mind? And of course, the same thing is true for all of us, just naturally. Some things really grab our attention and cause us to, think about them. Sometimes we perseverate, we, worry about, but also sweet things, like sometimes a really sweet thing happens and you just like want to think about it a lot. And that really stands out as a prominent part of your experience in that day or that year or in your life. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Mishpatim, there's a lot of action. And it struck me when I was looking at this Parsha at some point that, if you looked at the Parsha and you were like, what's this Parsha about? There's a lot of stuff. There are laws of all kinds, civil laws about slavery, about getting gored by an ox, about all kinds of things, way you should treat your parents, treat the widow and the orphan. There's a lot of action. There's conflict. There's even violence. There's things that to our contemporary sensibility are, highly problematic, incredibly inspiring things. It's there's just a lot in there. And at the very end of the Parsha, and it's almost like it's like all of the action, it's like the 6 days of the week, and then at the end we get Shabbat, and it's this different kind of thing. And at the end of the Parsha, there's this very kind of strange, bewildering little vignette where we go back into the narrative of receiving revelation at Sinai. And last week we read Parshat Yitro, giving of the commandments, and a lot of action there. And now we're getting into the details and mishpatim of laws and ways to build a society. And then this really interesting piece comes up. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm actually less interested in this source, and I'm going to go through it quickly, and more I want to focus on how this source gets picked up in a passage in the Talmud. And also just to say parenthetically, what I'm doing here is I want to show how a Jewish mindfulness sensibility can really be seen kind of in the heart and soul of our Jewish sources. I could go to, a Hasidic source, a Kabbalistic source. I love that stuff. But I really wanted to raise up how in this week's Parsha and in the language of the Talmud, we find sources that really speak to this kind of approach. So end parentheses and back to it. So here we are in the Parsha, and we have this story. It says, then Moses and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and 70 elders of Israel ascended. So, revelation at Sinai, and then kind of this core group of leaders is told to ascend up. V'yir'u et Elokei Yisrael v'tachat raglav k'maseh livnat hasapir u'che'etzem hashamayim latohar. And they saw the God of Israel. Kind of a surprising thing to say. And under God's feet, there was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire. And that's the JPS translation, and we'll unpack it in a moment. Like the very sky for purity. And then it says, yet God did not raise God's hand against the leaders of the Israelites, right? Because there's the idea, if that we learned already, if you see God, you're going to be killed. You can't live and see God. But here you have this group, they see God and God's feet, apparently, or something like that. They beheld God, and then they ate and drank, which is, like the most beautiful Jewish ending to the story. That, they have this profound spiritual experience, and then there's a meal that kind of culminates it, the experience. There's a ton of commentary on these verses, and our sages understand it in a lot of different ways, and mostly in a metaphorical sense. Not really God's feet. You can't see God's feet in an anthropomorphic human-like way, but there's something more figurative going on there. But the piece I really want to focus in on is the surprising description of what was under God's feet, right? This kamase livnat hasapir, like a work of bricks of made of sapphire. Scholars think it was probably not sapphire like the gemstone that we know today, but probably lapis lazuli, which is a rich blue color as well. So the surprising story. It then gets picked up later in the Talmud, actually in a couple of places, but this is where we see it in Menachot. And it comes in the context of a question that Rabbi Meir asks, which is a really good question. We have in the Torah, in Bamidbar, that you should make tzitzit on the corners of your garments, and you should put a patil tachelet, right? That middle paragraph of the Shema that we read, right? It describes that. The third paragraph of the Shema. The string of blue. And so Rabbi Meir is asking the question, why blue? What's the deal with blue? And it says, Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Manish Tana Tachelet Mikol Minei Tzivonin. It was taught, Rabbi Meir used to say, why is blue specified from all the other colors for tzitzit? And he goes on to answer his own question. מפני שהתכלת דומה לים, וים דומה לרקיע, ורקיע לכיסא הכבוד. שנאמר, ותחת רגליו כמעשה לבנת הספיר, וכעצם השמיים לטוהר. וכתיב, כמראה אבן ספיר, דמות כיסא. So again, he's answering his own question, because the color blue resembles the color of the sea, and the sea resembles the color of the sky, and the sky resembles the color of the throne of glory. As it is said, under God's feet, there was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Our verse in this week's Parsha. And it is written, like the appearance of sapphire stone is the likeness of the throne, coming from Ezekiel. So I love this passage for a number of reasons, but in part because I think Rebbe Meir is asking a really human question. I have these tzitzit, and they're supposed to remind me of the mitzvot, but how? And what's the point of having a blue string? And how do I approach that practice? Like, how do I experience it as a human being? And what he says to me is so beautiful, because he kind of helps us in a process of growth. And he says, why is it blue? Because blue should remind us of the sea. So the sea is wide open and expansive, but it's on the same plane as what we can stand upon, and we can touch it, right? You can go up and touch the sea. So it's accessible. And if you think of the sea, then let the sea remind you of the sky. The sky is more ethereal, and I can't really touch it. And but if I can get to the sea, then maybe I can step up and open myself up to a kind of expansiveness, which is even more expansive, the sky. And if I can touch that figuratively, then that can point me even beyond the Kisei HaKavod, to the throne of glory. And again, the rabbis are imagining, building on this story that we have in this week's Parsha and the verse from Ezekiel, that the divine throne is like the color of a bright blue open sky. And so, but if we just started there, like, we couldn't get there. If we said, look at the tzitzit and it should remind you of the throne of glory, like, that's hard to access. But what Rebbe Meir is saying, you know what it's like to stand in a wide open place and look at the sea and look at the sky. Just extend a little bit further, and that's where you're headed. And just like there's a Zen teaching that you should use the North Star to help you go north, but don't be a fool and think that you can arrive at the North Star. And in a similar way, he's kind of saying that's the direction you should head in. It's not that you're going to arrive at the throne of glory, but you're inclining yourself in that direction. So when I look at this Parsha as a whole, and I apologize to my wife for, I don't know if this would embarrass her, but she and I were talking about this, and she said, what are you going to teach? And I was telling her about this passage, and she says, like, I know that's in there, but I never pay attention to it. Like, I haven't really looked at that story. I don't really know much about it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of like what happens when we look at our lives. There are all kinds of things that could grab my attention. And I can focus on any of them. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a problem, but there's also something to be said for actively cultivating an awareness of certain parts of our experience. And what I love is when we look at the whole Parsha of Mishpatim, we have this whole spectrum of what we could pay attention to. And the invitation that I'd like to make tonight is, let's focus on that part of the wide open blue sky. And by that I mean, we'll go into a Jewish mindfulness practice using this in a moment. Just briefly, we'll start with 5 minutes. What I'm hoping to do with this is really to take our cue from these sources and take them seriously, in that especially the source in the Gemara and the idea from our tradition that we have these tzitzit to look at them and remember. And so for me, the practice is really about remembering and raising up an element of my experience that I could very easily miss if I wasn't actively looking for it. And let me use another way of saying it. Have you ever noticed, if you look up, now obviously if you look up at the treetops, you're not seeing many leaves, but if you could imagine a tree with leaves on it and behind it a blue sky, and sometimes I'm drawn to notice, like here at where I work at my desk, there's a window over here, and I could look out the window and see these treetops down the street. And if the sky is blue, sometimes I realize, even when the sky is not blue, but I realize that my eye and my mind is naturally drawn to the movement in the tree. And so I'll notice the tree and I'll think, oh, it's windy, or it's not windy, or look at the color of the leaves, or whatever it might be. And it's less typical that I will just notice the bright blue sky. And to me, that says a lot about the nature of these minds and these hearts. We're naturally drawn to looking at the places of movement in which we think there's action, in which we think there's something to figure out, in which we think there's a problem to solve, in which there's something that we need to kind of like take care of. So when we look at our day, or when we look at our year, or when we look at our lives, there are all kinds of things that could appear to be most prominent in our experience, and even defining our experience or defining our identity. But it may be that there are other elements of our human experience that are there that we're not paying attention to. And so in the moment in which I'm paying only attention to the movement of the leaves and the top of the tree, it is also true that at that very same moment, there's a bright blue, spacious, expansive sky. So a practice, a Jewish mindfulness practice, can be actively cultivating an awareness and a kind of connection to that experience of wide open space. Because I have access to that. And it's healthy and really wonderful to stay connected to that. Because when I'm connected to that expansive quality of experience, when I can feel that, I'm able to work with all the other stuff in a different, it's recontextualized. It's like the ideal of what happens when you go on vacation. Imagine you're sitting there on the beach under the blue sky, and it's not that the problems of your life have gone away forever. We all know that. But the ideal is that you're sitting there and you're feeling so spacious and open and calm that when you then remember, like, here's that like hard conversation I have to have with somebody, or that real problem in my life, that real tension, when I can hold it within that wide open, loving place of spaciousness in my own heart, I can relate to it so much differently. Things are possible that weren't possible before. And so I'm better equipped to deal with the difficulties of my life. We can easily read the news and it's terrifying, right? Like, what's going on in the world? Colleyville, Omicron, etc., Ukraine and Russia, right? We would be justified in saying, the world is on fire. And it's true. And it's also true that we can have access to a quality of experience and a reality in this world that is kind and loving and spacious and good. And to cultivate a connection and an awareness of that quality of our experience is so beautiful and so important. I just want to, so what we're going to do in a moment, and I'll stop sharing my screen in 1 second, is what I'd like to do is come into a 5-minute kind of exercise in really trying to feel this. One of the core principles in mindfulness is that it's really important to not just try to think our way through things and like think about an idea like this, but really essentially we have to feel it. And so, coming into an experience of spaciousness as the tachelet, the blue, is kind of pointing us towards, isn't about like thinking about tachelet or thinking about spaciousness. It's really about feeling it. And so if you can imagine, what is it like, even if you've never done this before, and I feel like it has been ages and ages since I've done this, but like you're there on a beautiful beach under a bright blue sky, that is not a thought. You're not just thinking, I'm on a beach and I see the blue sky. You're feeling it. And the feeling is, it's embodied and it's present in your body. And that's, of course, the body and the mind, it's all connected in profound ways, and in ways that science is revealing more and more. But it's felt. And so what we're going to do is just take a few minutes and kind of using our faculty of imagination to try out what Rebbe Meir suggests, which is first, and I'll walk us through this a little bit, is just imagine ourselves standing on a beach in front of a wide open sea. And just to feel that, what does that feel like to connect with that? And we'll stay there for a few moments, and then we'll turn our attention to this wide open sky. And it's picturing it, but more importantly than picturing it, we're trying to feel it. I know for me, that's like a loosening of the muscles, like in my belly and my shoulders. I think my breathing gets more relaxed and a bit deeper and slower. You don't have to force anything or try to breathe in a special way, but just to notice, what would it feel like as an experiment to imagine feeling that way? And we're doing it for the sake of cultivating that connection to that quality of our experience, again, so that then when we come back into the rest of our lives, we're actually better equipped to deal with all of the stuff that we need to deal with. So we'll do a bit of a practice, and then we'll stop. I'm going to ring a bell just to start and stop those periods, and then we'll have a chance. I'll see how the time is. But either we'll do another period like that, or we'll go into some questions, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll do that. We'll look at some questions, and then if we have time at the end, we'll do another short period of practice. Okay. You're all muted, so I was going to say, like, any questions, but maybe hard for you to ask. But why don't we'll just go in. Oh, and I also, before we do that, I just want to share this because I think it's cool. There's a French artist named Yves Klein. Sounds like he could be Jewish, wasn't Jewish. Did most of his work in the 1950s and 60s, passed away, I think, in the early 80s. He got into a phase of his artwork which was obsessed and really just focused on this color blue, this techelet. And he would create these works and like even paint rooms in this color blue. And what he wrote about this was it was like as if he was channeling Rebbe Meir. The idea was that the blue stimulated something within us that evoked the sense of spaciousness. And it's something that also there's been some really interesting research in the neuroscience of how different colors stimulate different kind of emotional states in people. And blue tends to stimulate creativity and a sense of calm. So we're going to cultivate that a little bit tonight. Okay, so you can adjust your seat if you'd like and just kind of settle in. You're welcome to close your eyes if you'd like. Keep them open if that's more comfortable. We'll just settle into our breathing. It doesn't need to be, we don't need to breathe in any kind of special way, but just to settle in. And in a moment, I'm going to ring a bell, and just you can listen for the sound of the bell. I don't know how it'll come out through the internet, but just let the sound of the bell help you settle into a bit of a different space, a different kind of quality of engaging in your experience. So now I invite you to imagine yourself being standing on a beach and looking out at the wide open sea in front of you. And let's just take a few minutes, just a minute or two, just to feel what that might feel like in our bodies, to feel relaxed. Imagine it's the perfect temperature, so you can really just let yourself relax into it. You can imagine yourself just gazing out at that wide open expanse and feeling that rich blue of the sea. And as other thoughts come into your mind, no problem. It's just a natural functioning of the mind. But when you notice that you're now thinking about something else, you can just gently bring your attention back to our intended object of awareness, which in this case is this kind of image of the sea. And that teshuvah, that returning over and over again, that's the essential process of mindfulness. And so now you can take another breath or two, imagining that wide open blue sea. And then you can imagine your gaze going upwards to the wide open sky. Harakia. And feel that blue of the sky and the sea just envelop you and wrap itself around you in a way that makes you feel safe. And if it's comfortable for you, you could even let a gentle smile appear on your face. Because even just feeling a kind of subtle joy in feeling and connecting with this quality of wide open space, it's a wonderful thing. And we can let ourselves feel happy. We'll just take another minute. See if you can feel it even more in your body. And I'll be quiet and just feel it. Open yourself to that wide blue open space. Okay. So feel free to put any questions in the chat. I hope that was enjoyable. I'm just looking at the chat and I see Mark Wolanski. Please give Noah a big hug for me. And hi, Zavi. So one practice, maybe I'll just say while see if any questions come in. When we take a practice like this and then we use it, then when we look at what we can think of as a kind of like normative Jewish practice of wearing tzitzit, especially with the blue color, that practice has come back a bit, and some people have that color of blue. It opens up all kinds of possibilities of engaging in Jewish life, including things like wearing tzitzit, or even seeing the color blue, as things that really can be about this orientation of cultivating the qualities of being that we hope to make manifest in the world. Okay, here's a question. So what makes your particular approach Jewish? Is it the thought about the sea and the sky and their color, which links to meditation in general? Great question. So if I were to say, is there are there Jewish forms of cooking? You'd say, yeah, like there are different Jewish forms of cooking and traditions and cultures around cooking. We could talk about it and learn about it and see the history of it, kashrut and other things. And then we could also, could affirm together that, there's nothing Jewish about eating per se. Eating is a human faculty or function. It's actually something, all life is consuming. And but there are Jewish ways of eating. And so there are Jewish ways of understanding and framing and bringing meaning and holiness and ethics into this human faculty of eating. And so mindfulness is not a Jewish thing or a Buddhist thing or a Christian thing. It's really a human thing. And it's a function of having a mind and a heart and a body. And it's an approach to working with one's lived experience that is given expression in a number of different traditions. And for sure in Buddhism, there was a real emphasis on what we think of as mindfulness now, or what we call mindfulness. There's a lot to say about that. But the thumbnail sketch is that there have been and there are sources within Jewish tradition, including ones really at the heart of our tradition, like some that we looked at tonight, that really speak to a kind of mindfulness orientation. And so for me, when I'm really reading any Jewish text, the ways in which these sources speak to really a Jewish mindfulness are abundant. And even more, there's a lot to say about what are kind of, just like there are things that we could say about cooking that, like that it's useful to say that there are, this is a Jewish way of thinking about cooking and a Jewish way of relating to eating. There are also Jewish sensibilities that when we bring them into a mindfulness practice, really inform how we do mindfulness. For example, like Buddhism primarily developed in a monastic setting. And so there were certain assumptions about the way in which somebody does mindfulness and brings it into the world. From a Jewish perspective, it's very clear that our spiritual life, the place where everybody is involved, and you're encouraged to be part of a family and a community, and it's much more worldly. So Jewish spiritual life in general is really worldly. And so when we apply that onto a mindfulness practice, it informs how we do mindfulness. Our ethical systems, our culture, our sources, our wisdom traditions, all these things come to inform how we experience mindfulness and practice mindfulness and give it a Jewish quality. Okay. Are you clearing your thoughts as well? Sorry, another question. Are you clearing your thoughts as well, or just maintaining your focus while letting your thoughts wander? Sight and senses versus focal point. Great question. There are different mindfulness approaches that actually play with these two different things. All mindfulness has some requires some measure of concentration. Concentration is about paying attention to something on purpose. And we can practice in a way that really dials up that concentration and helps us strengthen our concentration muscles, as it were. And some practices are much more like what we did tonight. They're much more about coming into a place in which we're cultivating a kind of open awareness, in which it's like resting in wide open sky and and then noticing when things arise. So they're really different kinds of practices that have different effects, but each one involves some measure of concentration and also open awareness.
I have a question around how you balance using Jewish texts for mindfulness with other parts of the text that are not really open for that. So even in Mishpatim, there are other parts of the text that talk about slavery and things that you wouldn't really think about for mindfulness. I'm wondering how you balance that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I try to balance it thoughtfully, and I really, I think a kind of one practice that I learned from a teacher of mine, Rabbi Alan Liu, of blessed memory, and he was a real pioneer in the kind of the contemporary Jewish meditation world. And he wrote a few books I highly recommend. Last name L-E-W, Liu, about Jewish meditation. And one thing that he would do was, and he had a very serious Zen meditation practice for years before he became a rabbi. And what he would do is in the morning, he would meditate, and then he would read, that one aliyah worth. And what he was trying to do then was not try to find the like mindfulness nuggets that are in the text. They're there, right, that we can raise up. And just like if we're doing a study on like I don't know, Judaism and art or something, like there are certain sources that will point toward, oh yeah, there where it talks about Bezalel, like that's a great art source. So for sure there are sources that are more germane to the kind of broadly speaking mindfulness or spiritual practice. But more importantly, he was, and what he taught me was about holding that experience of engaging in Torah from this mindfulness perspective. And a big part of it, and going back to this, practice of like kind of creating a big sky sort of consciousness, is that we're noticing in that space when things arise and how they impact us. And so one thing that I will often do if I'm bringing my mindfulness practice to bear on the Torah text, and I read about something that is ethically troubling or upsetting in some way, in whatever way, what I'm really looking for is, like, what happens when I read that? What arises within me? Isn't that interesting how when I read that, it makes me angry, and then that anger kind of clouds out a greater sense of calm. And then it's like I'm learning from how I'm holding that text and how I'm experiencing that text. So there are all kinds of levels in which we can bring this kind of practice to bear on the text. And Jews have always done that kind of thing. Like we're always relating to the sources in different ways. And that's part of the beauty and richness of it. And so, yeah. And so if I could kind of boil it down for me, the two key kind of guiding lights for me in thinking about the Jewish mindfulness orientation that I'm hoping to bring, it's really held by the qualities of chesed and emet. And they appear together in the biblical sources in many places. And I think they really capture what we're doing in mindfulness. So, and you need both. And so chesed, which is often translated as loving kindness, biblically, it's connected with brit often, of covenant. And so it's a quality of love that is like covenantal, meaning it's committed, it's dedicated. It's not like an emotional, a purely emotional love, like having a crush. It kind of comes, but it's not really deep. Chesed is a committed warmth that we bring towards our experience, towards other people, towards ourselves, towards the world. And the second quality is emet, which is translated, as truth. But here I want to read it really as like honest looking, honest seeing. And it's a commitment to looking honestly and directly at our experience that is the kind of the necessary twin to that orientation of chesed. And I'll get back to your question, Cora, in a second and how it applies. But to me, that's really, when I boil it all down, those are the qualities that I'm trying to cultivate. Trying to be in my life in a way that's has both chesed and emet, and we need both, right? If I'm too much on the loving side, then I may find myself sort of not asking important, hard questions. I may be too permissive in certain ways. It's our tradition teaches our world depends upon having the appropriate balance of things, and this is one of those ways. If I'm only on the emet side, then very quickly, if I'm only looking at something from the perspective of like what's true, it becomes harsh very quickly and very judgmental. And so we need this balance of chesed and emet. And mindfulness is in many ways bringing those qualities together. We're inclining ourselves warmly towards our experience and lovingly towards our experience as like a committed, loving parent would. I'm there for you, no matter what. It's not about if I feel like being there for you. I'm there for you. And it's honest, and it's direct seeing, and it's courageous in that, because often the things that we don't want to look at, there's a reason why we don't want to look at those things. And so I'm always trying to cultivate these two qualities. And the same is true when I study Torah. How do I engage in it in a way that is going to help me be more honest and more loving? And at the end of the day, after I study Torah or engage in tefillah and prayer, from a mindfulness perspective, if I deepened my capacity for being loving and honest, I was doing my practice. Orly asked a question, perhaps sometimes we also need gvura. Absolutely. Gvura being that quality of boundedness and boundaries. Absolutely. And interestingly, that's, if we had more time, I could get into that some more, but absolutely, that's a key part of this. It's all about bringing these different qualities into the right balance. Okay.
It looks like if there are no more questions, did you have anything else you wanted to add, Rabbi? Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'll move it over to Marlene to give a very nice thank you.
Thank you. My name is Marlene White, and on behalf of Beth, Emeth, Adath Israel, Beth David, and Beth Tikvah synagogues, and all our guests attending this evening, I would like to thank Rabbi Bendat-Appell for an insightful and informative presentation. We can all identify and learn what Rabbi Bendat-Appell has shared with us tonight. We continue to be faced with challenging times, and Rabbi, you have given us Jewish mindful practices which will assist us in getting through these troubling times and also to flourish into a better future. Once again, thank you, Rabbi, for this wonderful evening. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Stay safe, healthy, and we look forward to seeing you again at our future programs. Thank you.